Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me in the locker room on this Friday, July 14th. I'm Alan Locher. Shawn Thompson is here today to look back at his time playing Simon Hall on Guiding Light. Shawn began his career as a magician and circus performer and moved over to comedy. After his early days as a stand-up, Shawn moved over to acting. In addition to his role on Guiding Light, Shawn played Corny Collins in the John Walters cult classic Hairspray and performances alongside Rod Steiger, Jon Cryer, Eric McCormack, Ed Asner, and Michael Rooker, to name a few. He also wrote and starred in the comedy series The Newz for Fox Television. Shawn also was the lead in the Netflix BBC series My Perfect Landing. It is my pleasure to welcome Shawn Thompson to the locker room. Hey, Shawn.
Hello, Alan. How are you?
I'm well. Like we said backstage, it has been a long time.
Yeah, I think you said the amount of years. It was a bit scary. 37, did you say?
Yeah, well, I don't. I'll show the picture later, but a picture of you and Rebecca from July 14th, 1986. I don't know if that was the last time I saw you, but that's definitely a long time ago.
Yes, it definitely is.
Well, I want to first talk about the pandemic. It had you turn back to a teenage passion, photography, which is a passion of mine, where you created a photo series called The Dream House Invasion. Can you talk about the pandemic and what led to that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, obviously, we all experienced the beginning of the pandemic basically the same way, just in drips and drabs, and then suddenly everything was closed and no one was working, and we had to sort of shelter in place. At least that's what we were doing up here in Canada, in Toronto. But I couldn't sit around idle. I love to create. So not having an outlet that was being generated from outside, I decided to. Well, what happened was my daughter, who turned 11, I believe, at the time, she had a dollhouse. It was quite a beautiful dollhouse, a wooden dollhouse, but she turned 11, going on 18, so she didn't want it in her room anymore. And I said, oh, okay. And I took it out of her room, and I decided I'd put it in storage down in her basement, just in case, I don't know, if she decided to play with it again, or she'd give it to her own daughter should she have one. So I was putting it down there, and then the minute I looked at it, I realized it's a 3-wall set in miniature, like I had been working on in Guiding Light and every other TV show I'd done or film. And so there was the 3 walls, and she had all of this furniture and little dolls and things. And I started thinking about the idea of maybe doing a photograph with it. And then, the darker side of my mind came, and I decided to make kind of this murder that happens in the house. But I didn't have anything except for the things that were around the house and in my daughter's room. So I took sort of her toys, and there you go, and her American Girl, and I set this whole thing up. And it took quite a while. And of course, you see blood, and I had to create the blood, and I built some of the props and then just populated the rest of it.
Vivid colors, the detail's amazing.
Yeah, so the detail comes, so everything I do in the photographs that I do, I don't know how to use Photoshop. And even if I did, I didn't want to go that route. I wanted to try to do everything in camera. So I had a pretty good camera, but I didn't have much in the way of lights. I didn't have any. So I just used Home Depot lights and light coming in from the window that I diffused with a bed sheet. But the depth and the detail that you're talking about is what I wanted. I wanted it to look like you were kind of looking into a, department store, all of the details that you see at Macy's or wherever. But to do that, I needed to do one thing that was the only digital thing that I do, which is something called focus stacking. So I take 6, in that case, I think there were 7 photographs at various different focal planes, and then the one program marries all those shots together, and that creates that vivid detail from front to back.
What is it called again? One more time.
It's called focus stacking.
Wow, I'm going to look that up. That's amazing.
Yeah, you can do it in Photoshop, but Again, I don't know how to use Photoshop. I do use
No, me
Lightroom.
neither.
Yeah, I use Lightroom that's owned by Adobe as well, but to do some color correction, but virtually nothing. Everything is in camera, but the program itself is called I believe it's called Helicon Focus. It's not the Photoshop photo stacking, so it's a bit better, I find, but it's tricky to do though. The biggest thing you have to remember is it can't be done with moving images. Everything has to be still. So
And you do it with every image, basically?
Yeah, so you take whatever the shot that you set up, for instance, the dollhouse, it's set. And then I focused on the very closest item, which I think in this case was the blood of you can't see it in that photograph, but the blood was on the floor just below the man's head. And then I would focus, next step would be like something just beyond him, something just beyond that, something beyond that, until the very back wall, which is in focus. So I believe there's 6 or 7 photographs to make the one photo.
Wow. I love
Same as that.
There's
probably five photos to create that one shot. Wow. And in this case, these guys, I was just doing a bit of an homage to that very, very famous, arguably the most famous photograph in the world called, I believe it's called Men Having Lunch. I called this Superheroes Having Lunch.
At the Empire State Building, right?
Yeah, it was actually Rockefeller Center.
Rock Center. Okay.
Yeah. So that unknown photographer took that famous shot, and I recreated it obviously with the miniatures. But these guys don't really go into those positions, so I have to take a heat gun and I melt them just to the point where I can manipulate their parts so that they go into the positions that I wanted to as mimics.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they're human, really.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I created a little story. There's a story going on with every single person. So that helps you feel like that. But also it's because I'm able to melt the figures in such a way as they are a little more human than they would normally be out of the box from the manufacturer. So that create, and the looks that they give each. Again, this is a bit of my directing, acting side coming in too. This was shot during the pandemic.
Yeah, so it's like all your creativity.
Yeah, I brought it all. There's a bit of sense of humor to it, and same as that one was. I just really wanted to try to do something that mimicked sort of the Dutch masters. And again, as I said, I didn't have a lot of lights, so that's just light coming in from one side of the room, and there's a mirror over to the other side. But it took me about, believe it or not, a month and a half just to rot that fruit to that place. They don't all rot at the same time, as I found out. So grapes go much quicker, or whatever. I forget which ones that some, like the pear would go quick, but the apple wouldn't. So it just took forever to get them to the place where this is called
incredible.
Still procrastinating, as this one's called.
Yeah. And then this.
And this is also done at my house. This was during the whole Trump era. And I was just feeling a little bit like United States is, kind of gummed up. So I made this flag out of gummy bears. Oh
my God, I can't even tell that. But
yeah, if you see it
now,
close
I'm looking in at the blue and I can see them there.
Yeah,
more than
they're all gummy bears, and
that's incredible.
And it's actually it's actually on a piece of glass, and then I shone light through the glass to create the illumination. And this was actually in a light box when it was presented.
Wow!
So it really pops. Yeah, it's a really fun piece,
Rob,
but it took forever to do because the gummy bears kept falling off, and I'd have to lick them to stick them back on the glass. So, anyways, I went through a lot of gummy bears.
your work will be on display in Prince Edward County at the Maison Depoivre Gallery, July 28th through September 4th. Will it be a lot of what I just showed?
I know still procrastinating. The rotten fruit one is definitely one of them. They don't get them. It's funny. The American flag. I asked them, "Do you get a lot?" Because they have a lot of tourists that come through that area, and they said, "You get a lot of Americans that come through," and they said, "No, we don't really." I said, "Oh, that's too bad," because I had sold one of those, and it was to somebody who was American. Canadians, I'm not so sure they're as interested in that particular piece. The piece that you showed of the superheroes, I sold all of them out. So they're limited art prints, so there was only 5 of them. And I believe I only have 1 artist print left of that. So I have other different pictures, and obviously I'm taking new pictures. I believe we're doing 10 pictures at that gallery that they've decided which ones.
Well, like I said in the intro, photography was a passion as a teenager. How did that passion begin?
I was trying to think of that. I think what it was I just liked photography when I was, I was a magician at that time. Like that was my main sort of passion. And I started that when I was about 11. But photography, I can't really remember what attracted me to the photography. But I know that a then girlfriend, I was about 16, a then girlfriend at the time gifted me a Pentax camera for my birthday or Christmas, I can't remember. And I just started playing around with it and loving it. And I had never had a quote unquote professional camera, although this was a consumer camera, but it was a better camera than I had ever used before, manually being able to focus, manually being able to dial in the exposure, etc. So, and that was back in the days of film. So
costly.
Yes, yeah, you'd make contact prints and all of that. But I really caught into it and really just liked creating images. And I did, at that time I was taking pictures of, kind of more normal things, either people or landscapes or things like that. But I always had a bit of an eye for it, I thought. And, but you're 16, 17, and then all of a sudden you're going off and I at that point I was starting to get really serious about being an entertainer, and I was working as a magician / comedian. And, that took over. And although I still liked photography, I just wasn't doing it on the level that I was when I was 15, 16 years old, 17. So it was nice to sort of return to it. I mean, and I was learning all over again because obviously it's a digital world now. And, but and obviously subject matters that I had interest in the past weren't as interesting to me. I thought, well, I'm not, to take another landscape photo or whatever just didn't seem like something I needed to do. And as I said earlier, I was confined to some degree to the house. So it forced me to work in a certain arena, and this miniature work and toys and things like that, or things that I could cull from around the house. And I haven't really left that. I just think of things that I want to do, and then I shoot them in my house, and I don't have to go anywhere to do it. And nobody tells me what I can or cannot shoot. And the freedom that it's allowed me, even though I've been in a business which most people would think is fairly free, it's not a 9-to-5 job, but there's many people that are in the cogs in the wheel. And when you're an actor, you're just one cog. Even a director, I'm, beholden to producers and whoever. So the photography has allowed me to just sort of do what I want to do.
That's awesome. And you're selling it, and you're going to have a gallery show.
Yeah. That's all a big surprise. Special. Yeah, none of that was expected. That was all just for me to have fun while the pandemic was on. And then some people said, hey, why don't you do a little show? So I did a little show that was like a kind of a solo pop-up show in Toronto. It was very successful. I sold a lot of pictures, and I did not expect that to happen. And it snowballed, and that's where we're at now. Is now a gallery's got me this summer, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I'll go along for the ride.
You should. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. A 19-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter. Do you see any signs of them following in Dad's footsteps?
Certainly not my son. He has been more my wife, Catherine's side of things. He's very business oriented. She's an entrepreneur. So he's got more of that. But my daughter is definitely showing signs of wanting or interest in acting. Listen, I don't really push it, but I'm not going to say no. You can't do that. I know how difficult it is, but you got to let kids be kids, and they got to try things. So she's experimenting. She's taking some acting classes. That's the one thing I did insist on was the kids today. You see, this none of this was around when I was starting out, but that's the YouTube generation and the TikToks and the Instagrams. They're able to. The one side of it is good. It's sort of it's made it all sort of a little even the playing field, so to speak. But it's also made them think that fame is the most important thing, and getting the most likes, and all that stuff. And I think as a parent these days, you got to be cognitive of that stuff. And so I basically said, listen, if you're interested in acting, that's great. But if you're interested in acting, be interested in acting, and start by taking some classes and learning the craft of acting, and that side of it, not just the I want to be famous side. So that's the only thing I did, and she's doing that. She's enjoying it. So
that's the start.
yeah. Now whether she pursues that, I don't.
Right.
But she of my kids, she's the only one that's seems to be. I mean, look, my son could do anything. He's only 19, so he could change his mind and decide he wants to be a writer. I don't know. He's got a lot of talent that way. At least when he was growing up, we saw that talent in him as a writer and a visual storyteller. He himself had photography classes in his school, and he was a terrific photographer, sometimes surprising me. So I don't know, like they can go one route and then they just turn around the next day and all of a sudden they're doing something different.
Correct. Well, talk about how did fatherhood change your life?
I think in a few ways. I mean, obviously, it settled me down in a way. Like I didn't feel the need to move around as much. I was very much impatient and bored with places, and so I would not stick around places too long. I would love a place for 5 years, like New York. And then I go, now I got to have a change and go to LA. And so I feel like it helped ground me a little bit. And there was benefits to that. Even business wise, there were benefits to that. And I think also I became less selfish, like you can't really be a selfish person and be a parent. So I think that's probably the main changes. I mean, obviously, I come from a world of being selfish is important. You've got to because there's only you. You got to look out for number one in a way, and you got to do things to further your career, and it can be all consuming. And I was growing tired of that, and I think just having children. Again, grounded me in that way as well.
That's awesome. You mentioned you started as a magician and comedian. How did magic enter your world?
Kind of like with the photography, was somebody gifting me. An aunt gifted me. I was a very, very painfully, so I'm told, shy kid. I have no real memory of that. I'm not even sure you would, but I don't have any memory of it. But apparently, so I'm told, when I was 7, 8, and painfully shy, and an aunt thought that magic might be something that not only interest me, but would sort of bring me out of my shell. And so she gifted me a magic kit when I was probably 9. And I'm 10, I don't know, and loved it. And I practiced and practiced and practiced. And to some degree, it didn't really bring me out of my shell quite immediately because you're practicing alone. But I wanted to practice. You had practice in front of a mirror, sleight of hand, and what have you. However, I got to the point where I could actually perform it in front of others, and that did bring me out of my shell and was the start of my whole career as a performer was the fact that I was suddenly able to make that jump from being a shy person to somebody. I'm not saying that I'm not still shy. I am, but I would say that I found the way. I found the gateway to being able to be, less shy and more confident by performing in front of people.
What a smart aunt.
She was very smart, and it could have not worked, but something.
Right.
I don't know what I don't know what possessed her, like what she thought, where that came from.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Saw somebody else talk about that or something, because
It may have been that. Maybe I said something. Maybe she saw me watching a magician on a television show and I was interested. I don't know, but yeah, it definitely did the trick. And magic, as I said, just really was the gateway. Although in the early part of it is, and I did love children's birthday parties and those kind of things, kind of regular things that a magician does. And I was making money when I was quite young and doing these parties and events and, the Kiwanis Club and those kind of things, Christmas parties. And then as I got a little bit older, I started doing nightclubs and, when I was about 17. And at that time, and it was around 17, 18 years old, and I was living in Ottawa at the time, Ottawa, Canada. Comedy had just started to boom. Like, obviously there was the Comedy Store and Catch a Rising Star in New York, and those had started it. And then Canada soon thereafter had its clubs. And there was a club called Yuck Yucks in Toronto, and they had a sister club in Ottawa. And I started playing that club, mostly as a magician, but I'd always had comedy in my act. And so it was a comedy magic act. And then over time, I basically kind of dropped the magic. I still did a little bit, but mostly stopped doing the magic and just basically went straight into stand-up and became a stand-up comic.
Where did that come from? I mean, magic and comedy are not necessarily something I put together.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people would say that, although there are a lot of comedy magicians. You just don't see them that often. You're mostly going to see David Copperfield and, Doug Hennings and those kinds of people. But no, there wasn't anyone that I was mimicking either, or that was a inspiration. I just did comedy because I liked being funny, and I liked exercising a sense of humor, and it brought something different to the magic. I didn't like the preciousness of magic, that presenting it in the tuxedo and, oh, look at me, I'm so wonderful, and that wasn't really me. So I drifted towards the comedy, and then the comedy kind of just took over, and I just got more and more into the comedy side of my career and of expressing myself, and did stand up for. It took me to the States. It really opened up the acting world for me. Because if you get to a certain place with stand-up, and again, stand-up was really starting to really take off. Like, there was so many more clubs, and you could really kind of make a career out of it. And I did. And that led me to, eventually, I did stand-up even when I was doing Guiding Light. And I actually had my own show. Much to the dislike of the people at CBS, I had my own show in Toronto called Switchback, which was like a kind of like a David Letterman type of show, like a talk show. It was actually live and Sunday morning. So every week during Guiding Light, I would leave the set on Friday. Whenever I was done, I'd fly back to Toronto, which thankfully was only about an hour, a little more than an hour flight. Start prepping Saturday for a show Sunday, do the show, it was on Sunday mornings, do the show Sunday morning live, and then fly back to New York to start work usually on Monday for Guiding Light. So that year, the year that I did Guiding Light, I did Switchback at the same time. And that year, I think I figured it out that I did 265 hours of television in that 1 year.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Do your kids find you funny?
They do sometimes, but you're a dad, right?
You're a dad, yeah.
Mostly it's your dad funny, which is kind of roll your eyes kind of stuff. But I will say there are times when, if you're quick enough on certain things that you can make them laugh, you catch them laughing, and it's almost in spite of themselves. They wish they weren't, but you did something pretty funny. But I'll say 75% of the time it's like, oh,
Well, speaking of your comedy, it also led you to be a replacement host for Joan Rivers on her Fox show. Talk about that, having that opportunity.
Yeah, that was a very out of the blue thing. I'd done John Waters' Hairspray. I just finished I completed it. I don't even think it had been released, but it might have been, or just about to be released. And a person that I knew from a comedy club named Mark Breslin, he owner of a comedy club, this Yuck Yucks that I was talking about in Toronto, he actually knew Joan and was her, when she went over to do the show for Fox, he was the comedy booker. Anyways, to make a long story short, Joan was fired from the show, and then they were looking for replacement hosts to just kind of fill out the rest of the time that it would be on the air. They had no intention on keeping the show on the air. Many people think Arsenio Hall took it over. He actually had a brand new show on the Paramount Network, which I think had just started. He did not take over her show, although he did guest host as well as I did. We were the last two at the very end. I did 11 or 12 shows, and he might have done a bit more than that. But yeah, I was, so they basically said to me, hey, would you come down to do guest host one night? I guess I did okay, because they offered me 10 more. And so I basically went down and did 10 more on what was virtually a sinking ship. They had, everyone had abandoned. There was no writers. There was one writer, I think. So, and you couldn't get guests. They didn't want to be on this show because you were an unknown host, and it was a show that was probably going off the air. So you were kind of scraping the barrel for guests. And I did, I was able to pull the odd favor, like even Divine came on, but it was really, and also I had no intention on being a talk show host. That was not in my plans. But again, it was like something like different to do.
100%.
Yeah. And it was live, which I did have some experience with doing the Switchback show, but it was live to the East Coast. And at that time, there weren't as many channels. There was none of the stuff we have now. So I think they had, even for a show that was going down the toilet, it was still pulling in 15, 20 million people a night. And so I remember the first time those drapes opened, and I was like, there was that little pang of, oh my God, how did I get here?
I can imagine. My God. Yeah. And that red light going.
Oh, yeah. There's a part of you that just goes, oh boy.
For sure. Well, we're going to come back to Divine, but, from comedy, you made the transition to acting. Take us to Springfield. What do you remember about your audition for Guiding Light, and did you have to screen test?
Yes, I did. And again, it was an odd circumstance. I had been seen doing stand-up by Lorne Michaels, and they were casting a brand new season of Saturday Night Live. So, and he had been unceremoniously fired from his own show for a few years. I forget how it all happened, but it was a brand new person that was the head of NBC. And somehow Lorne either walked away or was fired. I don't know the situation, but he was gone for 2 or 3 years. And then, of course, another regime change, and they went, my God, we got to bring Lorne Michaels back, because the show was not doing well also. And they brought Lorne back. So this was the first year he was back, and he basically had a brand new cast. He'd already hired Randy Quaid, Anthony Michael Hall, and Robert Downey Jr. Those three were hired to do the show, and then he was filling out the rest of the cast. And this would be the year that Dennis Miller got it, and John Lovitz, and those people. But I had auditioned, and I went back several times, so I was very close. Again, I had never thought of myself as being on a show like Saturday Night Live. I didn't have a bag of characters, and I didn't do impressions. Some ways I didn't know why I was there, but I think Lorne had an idea that I might be great for the news, doing the news. Anyway, what happened was I was in New York, and I was in Toronto at the time, and they were flying me down to audition for Saturday Night Live at 30 Rock, and somehow the guiding light either saw a tape or somebody told me the casting agent was involved, the same casting agent, and they knew that they were looking for a Canadian someone to play a Canadian on the guiding light. I think it was almost a lumberjack kind of character, and it was going to be this character, and they had auditioned 900 people, and they had yet to find this person. So I get thrown in as a ringer. This guy, he's kind of a stand-up, whatever, and he was doing acting, but they would have not necessarily known that. And I came in and did a test with India,
Mary Kay Adams.
Mary Kay Adams, and that was, I guess, the relationship that was going to be the relationship that was going to happen with this Canadian character. But then they found, and they threw out the Canadian guy, even though I was Canadian, threw that out and said, we're going to make him a magician. He's going to roll into Springfield on a train, and he's this mysterious guy, and that's going to be the thing. And so that's what happened. And I did well enough in the screen test that they went, this is going to work. And the next thing I know, I tell you, it couldn't have been a few weeks later. I was down in New York. I had a green card. I was suddenly, living in New York City, and I was on a soap opera, which I didn't really know much about. And I was this magician character. And the nice thing was that they didn't know anything about magic, so they let me write all the little bits that I would do that were kind of the magic parts of the show, of my character. That stuff all changed a little later when I suddenly was with Jesse, with Rebecca Staub, and I don't remember I don't think I was doing magic at that point. I can't really recall, but that's how it started. And
wow.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, working with a powerhouse like Mary Kay, what was that like?
Well, she was definitely powerful. I'll tell you how powerful. One day we were doing a scene. We had obviously this relationship at the beginning, and then I guess they were shifting it, or I don't know. You know how these things go. They suddenly change their mind. And
they get a different idea.
Yeah, get a different idea. I don't even think it was that they were going to throw me with Jesse, but I think they just thought, oh, we're going to go in a different direction. So the relationship started, the on-screen relationship between India and Simon was, and also I don't even think I had Simon Hall, and then later I became this long-lost son of Alexandra. So that stuff
from one powerhouse lady to
and I'll tell you a story about Beverly that's even funnier than India. But to Mary Kay, we're having this argument, and I think I'm telling her I don't want to be with her anymore, or whatever the thing was. And she's supposed to slap me. Well, she hauled off and slapped me so hard, like I thought she'd give me a stage slap, but she didn't. She just whacked me across the face and stunned me. And I was like, I can't believe, I mean, the actor part of me was stunned as much as the real person. And I was like, I'm sure I would love to see that, because the reaction would have been real. But I'll tell you a story about Beverly McKinsey that's really, I always thought, this is just the irony of all ironies, and what a small world it is. When I was a kid living in Ottawa, I lived very close to the school, and I'm talking grade school. So grade 3 and grade 4, that kind of area, we lived very close to this school. So I could come home at lunch. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she loved soap operas. And she had her favorites, and
Another World.
Another World. So I would be there as a young boy. My mother would be like folding clothes or doing whatever, watching the show. And I would see Iris come on. And as a young boy, I was thinking, this evil woman. I was scared of her, really, because she's a terrific actor. So, she pulled that character off enough that she scared a young 7-year-old boy or 6-year-old boy. So I had this memory of her, and then all of a sudden, I'm her long lost son on Guiding Light. I mean, my mother couldn't believe it, let alone me, because I certainly remembered her. And I go, I cannot believe I've come from the basement of my house in Ottawa at 6 years old and hating and scared of this woman to now playing scenes with her in a studio in New York City. I just went, how did this happen?
Did you share that, I hope, with her?
I think I did. Yeah, I think I did.
And was Mom alive when you got Guiding Light?
Yes, she was.
Oh,
she was. And she was, I mean, that wasn't her show, but of course she started watching it, but that, how people get into their shows, right?
Yeah, but she must have been knowing that was Iris.
She said to me, she often would sit there with her mouth slightly agape going, more surprised than me. And my grandmother, God bless her, was from Ireland, but when she moved from Ireland, she listened to Guiding Light on the radio. So that was her show as a soap opera, but back in the radio days.
Incredible. I mean, why I was a fan. My mother learned to speak English watching Guiding Light and As the World Turns.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's many others like that too.
For sure. I mean, it really is incredible. And, Beverly, Mary Kay for You, Chris Bernot.
Yeah. I got to work with some really good people, and I enjoyed working with those people that were.
What do you think you learned from them?
Well, I feel like I obviously, there's a certain part of the stagecraft of it, and I was very worried when I started the show because I didn't think I could memorize all those lines. I was quite certain I couldn't, and so I learned a certain discipline about acting that I didn't have, because first of all, I'd done some acting work in television and some stage work as well. So I did have, but not to the degree of the thing that most people don't realize with those shows, which is that you're not getting your scripts a week in advance to learn them. You're basically learning the night before the script for the next day. And so I just was having a struggle with that. And I remember them helping me with that and some tricks and things, but also just, their discipline and their sense of professionalism. Not that I was unprofessional, but you come in the comedy world, I'm telling you, it's very loosey-goose, right?
Completely different. Yeah.
It's completely different. And improv and all that's the world that I came from. Stand up where you're a loner, you're all, So I really got the idea of the meshing of a cast and the discipline and
how lucky, because really being one of your first big acting roles, that it just happened that they paired you with 3 incredible professionals, not like newbies or something, like where you were all trying to find your way. Like these were people who had been doing it
for years and years and
years.
Up
watching Beverly,
exactly. Yeah, no. I was very, very happy. I was also, I was honored in a way too, to that they felt that I could hold my own with them, And I remember Beverly several times when we had some pretty serious scenes coming up to me afterwards and telling me, you did a great job. Like it meant the world to me that she was saying that.
I'd go home after that.
Yeah. No, it really did. It meant something. So she gave me a lot of confidence.
That's awesome.
And sparring with Mary Kay was also, it was a challenge and fun,
Yeah, I think she's probably one of the best for everybody she'd been paired with, like sparring is the great word. I love that you use that, because Mary Kay sparred with everybody.
Yeah.
With Beverly, with
Yeah. That was her.
Yeah.
It was her nature.
Nemesis.
Yeah.
Well, as we said at the beginning, I took this 36 years ago today, which is wild. And it's funny because I watched one of the YouTube videos and they had a clip from this particular episode.
That looks like I'm in a tuxedo, doesn't it?
I don't remember exactly. I'm sure one of the fans will tell me in a minute. I don't remember exactly what it was. Do you remember meeting Rebecca for the first time?
I do. I remember, well, she had been on the show just a little bit earlier than me, I think. And I don't think we cross paths very often. You start work, how the show will do the morning and afternoon.
Yeah.
And I was often in the morning shift, and I don't think that she was. And so I would, occasionally see her, but we didn't really speak. Aside from saying hello, so I didn't have a lot of contact with before. And then they took me into the office one day and said, we're going to pair you with Jesse. And I said, oh, okay. What's that about? And they said, well, we think there might be something there with, you're the sort of mysterious magician guy. And I was never, the thing with soap operas that's well known is that they really like to have black or white characters. And they go, okay, you're a bad guy or you're a good guy, or a good girl or a bad girl. And there's very rarely anything in between. And I know this for certain because I did a comedy show for the Procter & Gamble people in Cincinnati, I think it was. And I sat beside.
While you were at Guiding Light?
Yeah, they asked a bunch of us that had extracurricular talents, mine being stand-up, magic, whatever. And there was somebody that did piano, and there was somebody who did this and that. And there was about 6 of us. And some guy, I forget who it was, set this whole thing up that we would do this show for all the mucky mucks.
Probably Ed Trock, because he was.
That sounds familiar.
He's the he at that time, I believe, was the P&G rep.
Okay, so
he wasn't there when I got there, but I know that name.
Yeah, and this wasn't very early. This was early on in my stay there. But anyway, he brought this crew. We rehearsed this sort of show, and most of us just did our acts or whatever our talent was. And I did stand up sort of / comedy magic. Huge success. People loved it. There was probably 1,000 people in the room. I guess they were all Procter & Gamble employees and what have you, and big banquet. And then at the end, or that night, that cast of people sat down with some of the bigger mucky mucks of Procter & Gamble. And I happened to be sitting right beside the head of Procter & Gamble. And I forget his name, or one of the heads. And he said to me at one point, I was surprised he even knew or cared about the characters on the show, but he did. And he said, we really like our characters on our soap operas, daytime dramas, to be either black or white. And I knew he was getting at, because I was definitely trying to play my character in the gray zone. You didn't really know if he was a good guy or a bad guy. A mysterious magician rolls into town. It could be anything.
On a train.
Yeah, on a train. So he said, we really, I said, well, I kind of prefer the gray area because I find it much more interesting and mysterious. And he said, yeah. So we would prefer that we really start shifting your character in, a different direction. And well, okay, maybe a month later, all of a sudden, I'm, with Jessie, the good girl. The thing was that, you can write a character to be good, but the actor can find a way to play him the different levels of that. And I continue to have fun with playing the levels and the shading around even what was, ostensibly a good supposed to be a good guy. And he's with the good girl, Jessie, and all of that. So that's how it came to be that I was with that character. And then obviously with Rebecca and I started working, I mean, we were just really started to just get to know each other at that,
Wow.
as the show was going on, and as we had scenes. And I didn't, as I said, didn't really have a lot of interaction with her prior to that.
That's so funny that they really paired you.
They did, and we ended up having a relationship that lasted much beyond the show. So
Yeah.
I don't know what they saw, or I don't think they saw anything, because I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know that you crossed before they put you together. So that's
I don't think we ever. I'm certain we never had a scene that even she was in. It may have been, but I don't recall it.
so
And as I say,
interesting.
aside from possibly saying hi, they had something in mind that they thought, and maybe, as I said, maybe it was triggered by this gentleman who was at Procter & Gamble saying, "Well, we want to make you either black or white, and none of this gray stuff, none of this mysterious stuff." And
Well, the
maybe
fans,
that's where
the fans definitely loved Simon and Jesse.
without question, yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
never.
that, whoever
Yeah.
did have that idea, it was a great pairing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how the show works in terms of the,
Yeah.
whether
Still,
producers get together or the writers go, "Hey, we think this would work," and maybe that's
people still
how
talk
it.
about them. The impact of it. It's crazy. One of the fans, Clay, said Shawn always looked like he was straight out of the pages of Tiger Beat in 16 when I was little. Was Mr. Thompson ever featured in any teen magazine?
I was not. The show that I did, the show Switchback that I mentioned, was set up to be a teen talk show. We had rock performers on and that kind of thing. However, what happened was, because we were doing comedy, and I was really pushing the comedy part of the show, because it was on at this odd hour on 7:00 live in the morning. We ended up having an audience. There was teens watching it, but it was majority people who had been up all night partying and were just bleary-eyed, sobering up. And that's who the audience primarily was probably people between the ages of 20 and 35. So I never really, there's certainly, there was, sometimes things that were teen oriented, but never any kind of magazines or anything. And I didn't pursue it. It didn't, at that point.
If you had been truly acting at that age, you probably would have, but.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe. Yeah. And some of that stuff's out of your control, but I wasn't pursuing it. And I think because I had the stand-up side, which was, a little less, was more naughty, that I wasn't really approached that way, because I wasn't
right,
quote unquote clean, even though I wasn't dirty. But
the comedy. Well, shortly after Guiding Light is when you did Hairspray, correct? Or
yeah, I think it was just like a year after.
What do you remember about the audition and stuff for that?
Well, I was, like all actors in New York, going out for, various things, plays and whatever was going on in New York, which was not quite as busy as it would have been in LA, but I liked New York, so I stayed there. And I took classes there. And
where'd you live in New York?
I lived at first in the West Village, loved it, on Bleecker Street.
Yeah.
And then I moved in with Rebecca, and we lived over at 36 and First for the remainder of the time. In a kind of a newish condo, not at that time, kind of a nowhere area. I preferred the West Village for obvious reasons, just more vibrant and interesting.
Not my favorite area. I forget what that's called now. No.
Well, it used to be called Murray Hill.
Oh yeah, it's still Murray Hill. Thank you. I couldn't think of it.
Yeah, you're close to the UN if you want that, but there was nothing around it. It was on the river, so you had a nice view. But...
Well, and Guiding Light did move to 44th Street, so you would have been close over there.
Oh, did they?
They did for many years. After 26th, they were on 44th between 2nd and 3rd.
I would have been very close. I could have walked to work.
Screen Gems. Sadly knocked, which is an old studio where they did commercials and Search for Tomorrow. Now it's an apartment building.
Yeah. Oh, I think, and also was the studios, the original studios on 26th Street, they were also knocked down for condos.
No, they are No, that's where Wendy Williams did her show and where Rachel Ray did her show.
Oh, so they're still studios.
Yeah, they might have added on to it. The front is a little different, but it's still it's the Chelsea Studios.
Chelsea Studios. Oh, fantastic. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah,
I would love to go
there.
and visit that one day. I thought someone had told me they tore it down because it was a great studio. The fact that there was two of them on top of each other, and they were large. Anyway,
right
to John.
FIT.
What?
Right behind FIT.
Yeah, exactly. But John Waters was casting for Hairspray, and the casting agent that he had, I'm blanking on her name, but anyway, she was well known, and she put out a casting for it. I came in, I auditioned for John. I have to say, I think 7 or 8 times. And by the third, I was going, I don't know what he's looking for. Like I wasn't doing anything different. And he later told me that that part of my appeal to him was that I had the suit. I had a suit that I wore that was actually something I was wearing when I did this Switchback show I was saying in Toronto, and it was almost a sharkskin suit. And I think it reminded him of the period, and it had nothing to do with my acting. I mean, he liked that obviously as well, but for whatever reason, he brought me back time and time again, and I can only assume that he was bringing back maybe less and less each time, but there must have been somebody else, 2 or 3 or others that he was looking at. And finally, I got the call that I was in, and you have to understand my understanding of John at that time was a guy who had done these kind of quirky, weird movies, and I really didn't know what I was signing up for. Although I'd read the script. Well, eventually I read the script. I had just the sides, and eventually I read the script and went, oh, and everyone was talking about, well, this is going to be John's breakout film because it's not, it's not so culty. It's still culty, but not culty that like the other John Waters films. And he had suddenly gathered this fantastic cast of, oddballs. And we shot in Baltimore, and for like 3 or 4 weeks. And John was just simply lovely to work with, and just a very kind man. And he had thankfully he had this crew of people that he had worked with for years, and they were all on the show. And from his cinematographer to his costumer, everybody, they had all worked together. So with this real sense of family, and very quickly that sense of family that he brought to it infiltrated the cast that were unknown to each other. And so we really, really gelled. And that, I think, was part of the secret of the film, was that's evident in it. I mean, whether it was Deborah Harry or Sonny Bono or Ricky Lake, didn't matter. Everybody really got along, liked each other. And, we were also, because we were in Baltimore, it was John's town. And so he was able to sort of host us in a way. It was a joyous, wonderful experience. And the fact that it became this, pretty big hit it was a surprise to everyone, but including John, I'm sure. But I couldn't have been happier for him, because it was well deserved, and it was a neat little film. He kept saying he didn't want because there was this whole racial subplot, and I was carrying that to some degree with the show, the Corny Collins show, and we were trying to integrate the show, and Ricky was trying to integrate it, but John was like, he was very afraid of that. He just didn't want it to be a message movie. And I remember him saying that very clearly to me a few times, that, I just got to make sure it doesn't drift into being that and not the other things, that the quirkiness, the world that he was inventing or interpreting from his childhood. And so I think he was very cognizant of that, and made sure that it didn't ever get too maudlin or too serious. And I think he was successful in that.
I mean, did you have any idea it would be the cult classic?
No, not when you were shooting it. You knew you were having fun, and that it was good, and that you were laughing a lot, and the family part of it, but I don't know if anyone knows what, whenever you're doing, I've been in a bunch of movies, and I've directed my own movie, and you just don't know, you're doing it, and everyone's pulling their weight and doing their best. No one wants to make a bad film, but the secret to a great film, I'm not sure anyone could put their finger on it. Yes, you can later say, blah, 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 but it's all hindsight. And I think when you're making it, you're just in it. And, he didn't have a lot of money. And, he was, scraping, to just be able to make the movie he wanted to make. And I'm sure I was not privileged to the conversations he had, but I know from doing my own film just how hard it is to make a movie, and how money is always tight and there's never enough. So I'm sure he was going through all of those things. So to see it, I mean, the first time that we saw it was at a premiere in Baltimore, which was really well attended and a super event. And I thought, oh, and the crowd really loved it and all of that. But you're going, okay, it's a premiere, and it's in its own. In here are friends and family, whatever, you just don't know. But then the reviews came out, and I think it was Pauline Kael and like some of the big heavy hitters said John Waters has arrived, and just, it was like, I remember the poster that came out almost immediately after, having 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, 2 thumbs up. And I thought, oh my goodness, this thing's away to the races. And it did. And then,
Wow.
Played around the world. And I'm very proud and happy to have been involved in it.
You mentioned some names: Ricky Lake, Divine, Debbie Harry, Sonny Bono. Any memories that come to mind of any of those folks?
Well, Debbie was, again, you're looking at an icon and someone who I had, listened to, and I was the shy part of me was, when I was around them before we really even filming, I just remember, I couldn't even really get it up to go up and, say hello. And the same thing with Sonny Bono, because I had grown up with him as a child watching that darn show. My parents did. I was, but again, I was just like, I didn't feel like, hello, I'm, and I wasn't like super well known or something. So I didn't really feel like, but I remember Sonny, God bless him, just the nicest man in the world. And he just marched up to me, said, "Hi, I'm Sonny Bono." Put his hand out, and I said, "Oh, hi, I'm Shawn Thompson." But a big smile on his face. I go, that's the way you should do it. Just take the bull by the horns and not be afraid of anything. It's not my nature, but I was always impressed by the fact that he didn't have any airs about him. I mean, he was really the guy that he came across as, even as
well,
mayor.
and that's somebody you grew up watching. That's that is the way to be. That's somebody.
And I had
that's a great lesson to learn.
It really is, because I had not that long before had an experience with somebody who will go unnamed, but was a very big entertainer in the same period as Sonny and Cher, huge entertainer. And I did a show with him, and he was the absolute opposite. Like, I had said at some point, I just wanted to say I've been a fan or whatever. And he just, I'm pretty sure he said, "I don't care," like just something awful. And it was just an awful experience, but just a bitter man, like I go, "Oh, that's awful." And then Sonny Bono was the absolute opposite. And frankly, so was Deborah Harry, even though I didn't have a ton of conversations with her, and Divine, just like, again, I'd seen a couple of the movies, and what was I to expect? Like, I didn't know. I mean, he could have been anything, but nope, just a genuinely nice person. And I guess it shouldn't be surprised that he and Jon works together so much, because I felt the same way about Jon. And again, I didn't know what to expect with Jon, but he just ended up being this. I don't know. There's sometimes where you have experiences in the business where you realize just how, I don't know, normal people can be. And I know there's exceptions, but sometimes it's just, they're just nice, normal people. And damn it, that's the way I prefer to be, and that's the
It,
way
it should
who I
be
prefer to
correct.
work with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Barbara said Sean's portrayal of Simon was so memorable because he was unique and unlike the cookie cutter hunk. And he's
Well, that's
correct.
very nice to say.
He's correct that the gray area is more interesting for the actor and the audience as well. Writing, directing, magic, comedy, photography. If you could pick only one, do you think you know which one that would be?
It's really hard to say because it changes. Like, I when I started directing and I went full on into it, I thought, quite frankly, I have found my niche and this is perfect for me. It brings all the things I know how to do, whether it's the acting and writing, comedy, because I was doing a lot of work in comedy in television and film. And so I thought, oh, this is just mirroring the visual side of it, which you could call the photography side. It was mirroring all those things together. And I thought, oh, this is perfect for me. And I'm much more than a cog in the wheel. I'm more in control. I loved everything about it. 5, 6 years go by, or even more than that. I think I did it for like 15 years. I mean, technically I'm still a director, but it just started to just be less appealing. I don't think I'm somebody that was ever destined to just do one thing. I just don't think it's in me. I think I get bored. And I hate to say that because I know people will give their eye teeth to some of the things that I've done, but I just want to keep challenging myself.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You really have. I mean, you have, you wrote and directed your own movie.
Yeah.
You've written many things. You've acted in television and movies. Comedy. I mean, that is really challenging oneself to have life experiences that some of us will never ever do. But it's a good thing, I think, saying that, because we should all challenge ourselves.
Well, ideally, I think that would be the case. But I mean, I understand that there's certain people. I remember being in a bar once and somebody coming up to me and talking to me, and I think they had seen me on something that would just had recently come out, and they're saying, "Oh, I saw you on this thing," or it might have been Hairspray, and they were, like, "Oh, how is it?" And they were just super interested, lots of questions, and I turned it around on them and said, "So what is it that you do?" And the person said, "Oh, you wouldn't be interested." And I remember thinking, "Oh, that is so sad that that's the way they feel about whatever job that they did or their life." And it just reinforced that idea that I never want to be that person who isn't interesting or doesn't feel that they are themselves interesting. And that does mean challenging. And you don't always win, and there's things you're going to fail doing it. I didn't get into writing and directing just because I decided to just do it. The challenge came from when I did the show, The Newz, for Fox Broadcasting Corporation. The guy came to me and said, "Oh, I'd love you to be on the show." It's a sketch comedy show. And I was sort of half interested. And he said, "Well, what could convince you to do it?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, if you let me do some short films that I could write and direct, and I'll be in them as well, I'll do the show." And he said, "How many?" And I said, "I don't know, 5 in the year that we were doing the show." And he said, "Deal." And he didn't give me much money. And I had to, I was like, but it was like going to film school. I mean, I remember going into San Fernando Valley and going out to pick up the dolly myself and going to costume houses myself. There was no crew per se. Yes, we had a cinematographer, we had a few things, but it was like being in film school. And I learned so much by doing those little short films. And then, of course, I wrote a film, and I thought I would never get to direct it, but they saw those short films and said, "Well, wait a minute, why don't you direct this film that you wrote?" And that's how that happened. So, some small thing that you do that you think, this is going to be a small challenge in the course of another job that I'm doing, but it's challenging me, and I'll get to be, as I say, almost in film school, and that begat my own film and my
With
writing
Christopher
a feature
Lloyd,
film.
Parker Posey, and Gil Bellows. I mean, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, it was pretty darn good. Again, wish we had more money, and unfortunately, the company went bankrupt just around the time of the release, so it barely saw the light of day. But you know what? I got to make a feature film that I wrote, and I mean, I may never get to do it again, but I did it, and that's. Sometimes you just gotta go for it, and you might fail, but that's okay. There's a lot of learning that comes out of failure.
Incredible. Shawn, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Alan. It was a pleasure seeing you again.
Thank you as well. Long time. It's been a long time. Hopefully, if you come to New York and do comedy or something, let me know. I'd love to see you.
Okay, terrific.
You stay well. Have a great weekend. And everyone loved seeing you here.
Oh, terrific. I'm glad.
Thanks again. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too, Alan.
Thanks everybody for joining today. Don't forget to check out Shawn's, if you're in Canada, check out his gallery show at Prince Edward County at the Maison Depoivre Gallery, July 28th through September 4th. Please join me on Tuesday evening, July 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern when Michael Corbett joins me live. And then next Wednesday, July 19th, when medium, author, and lecturer John Edward joins me live here. If you remember, John Edward has a huge connection to Guiding Light himself. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can do so down below. Turn on the notifications for reminders of all upcoming shows. And if you liked today's episode, which I hope you did, click the like button. And you can stream audio versions by searching The Locker Room on your favorite streaming platform. Have a great evening, everybody. I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope you stay safe.